The views expressed on this episode, as with all episodes of Sounds Like a Cult, are solely host opinions and quoted allegations. The content here should not be taken as indisputable fact. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
When you guys had referenced BookTok as a cult, I was like, not a cult. And then I sat back and thought about it and I was like, oh my God. When I first joined BookTok, I was dog-earing the pages. And apparently that's a big no-no on BookTok.
But they're your books.
This is why it's a cult, guys.
It's literally like the Hunger Games, but for all these book people. I mean, I guess it's good for the publishing industry, the author, making some good money, but at what cost,
This is Sounds Like a Cult, a show about the modern-day cults we all follow. I'm your host, Amanda Montell, author of the books Cultish and The Age of Magical Overthinking.
And I'm Reese Oliver, Sounds Like a Cult's coordinator and today's co-host.
Every week on this show, we discuss a different zeitgeisty group that puts the cult in culture, from Harry Potter heads to van lifers, to try and answer the big question.
This group sounds like a cult, but is it really? And if so, which of our three cult categories does it fall into? A live your life, a watch your back, or a get the fuck out? The point of this podcast is to scrutinize and poke a wee bit of fun at how fanaticism and belonging show up in everyday life, even in unexpected places, including one of the most seemingly innocent and wholesome pockets of all of our social media feeds, BookTok. Yes, the side of the TikTok algorithm that is dedicated to discussing books. The future of the overall church of TikTok hangs in the balance every single day, but as you will learn from today's episode, BookTok culture honestly extends far beyond the app.
Yes, indeed. This episode of Sounds Like a Cult is brought to you by Liquid IV. One thing that I'm pretty sure absolutely everybody on this planet can benefit from is extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. All you gotta do is tear, pour, and enjoy. Now that I'm in my flirty 30s, I'm also trying to take much better care of my body. And Liquid IV is amazing because it's powerfully hydrating. And they truly have so many flavors I really think you'll enjoy. White peach, rainbow sherbet. Break the mold and own your ritual. Just 1 stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Treat yourself to extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code CULT at checkout. That's 20% off your first order with code CULT at liquidiv.com. This episode of Sounds Like a Cult is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. If you're looking for a hotel or vacation rental, Booking.com has exactly what you're looking for. I'm actually planning a little trip to New York. There's an off-Broadway show I want to see. And I gotta tell you, when I'm in New York, hotels are the way to go. But it's tough, because some New York City hotels are not up to snuff. But Booking.com truly offers everything. If I'm looking for something bougie or something right there in Midtown near all the theaters, Booking.com makes it super easy to narrow down my search. And you can get super specific with it, like if you want to stay at a hotel that has a sauna or a pool. No matter who you are, Booking.com has the stay that is ridiculously right for you. So what are you waiting for? Find exactly what you're booking for on Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Now, I feel like it's not that subversive of a statement at this point to claim that cults can emerge on TikTok. TikTok is, of course, a place where culty conflict and highly worshipped influencers and misinformation tend to thrive. But some listeners might be scratching their heads right now tuning into this episode thinking, how could that possibly apply to a subject as cozy and quaint and innocuous as reading? And I will be honest, I had that question too. I certainly know from writing my book Cultish and from doing this show for so many years that a cult can spring up around literally anything from essential oils to Trader Joe's products. But as I am personally not in the cult of TikTok at all, when we started getting a ton of requests to cover the Cult of BookTok a few months ago, my first reaction was like, what does that even mean? I am vaguely aware that there are a lot of passionate fans of the romantasy and YA genres on TikTok specifically, but beyond that, I am actually not at all sure what shape this cult takes, but I am excited and I shan't lie, a little afraid to learn more. Reese, what's your TikTok user status these days?
Honestly, most of my relationship with TikTok is trying to use it less. I really want to beat the system, so I've deleted the app. I only go on it online. I have dabbled a wee bit in BookTok just because I feel like using TikTok for books feels constructive on its face, right? Like I'm using TikTok to engage in a non-screen related hobby. There's like a few very niche lit fic BookTok girlies that I enjoy, but they are very much the exemption and not the rule.
Yeah, I want to state up front that I guess part of what intimidates me about TikTok is just that my impression of it as an outsider is that it is all so fast-paced and reactive. And what I love about reading is that it is so slow and it is an invitation to think a little bit more deliberatively and critically. And TikTok invites the opposite, so that clash feels wrong. We've scrutinized a lot of different types of influencers who traffic in counterintuitive territory, like Instagram therapists and various religious influencers who use these platforms almost as a missionary site. And I don't know, like I love that people are reading more. I've read about how Barnes & Noble is opening up dozens more locations because of BookTok. It's like keeping this dinosaur industry that I care about so much and that my livelihood depends on as an author alive. And that's the positive side of what cult tactics can do, right?
Yes.
They disrupt, they rally people around a collective mission, they provide something to do to feel less alone, you know? And I'm genuinely tickled that this cult energy has made its way to books. I know that BookTok really put the romantasy, aka romance plus fantasy genre on the map. I have never in my life heard people talk about books as fanatically as young women talk about the work of authors like Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. And at the same time, I feel skeptical that BookTok is even really about reading.
Yeah, again, from an outsider's perspective, it feels very performative because it is literally like, look at me reading.
I hadn't considered that. Like, to me, I'm just like, oh, I'm afraid that people are talking shit about books that they might not even have engaged with that critically in order to like capture attention. But you're like, no, when people are taking a video of themselves reading, they're like, not even internalizing words.
Yeah, it just feels to me like it's more what books look the prettiest in my bag this week. What do I want to be seen reading in my photo dump on my Instagram? And like I might be zooming out a little bit from BookTok, but it's hard not to zoom out because BookTok has grown into something so much more than just a destination to bond over books. As our listeners have pointed out, it has turned into something of a cult, complete with rituals. There's aesthetics, there's different sects based on genre, even thought control and power dynamics. To analyze this cult, we are going to talk to two completely different BookTokers in two completely different conversations today, who are at once leaders and followers of this cult. Miss Morgann Book, yes, that is her name. Yes, I am very jealous. And then be sure to stick around for our juicy culty analysis with Ayman of Ayman's Books. But for now, here's Morgann.
Morgann, welcome to Sounds Like a Cult.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here and talking about books.
Are we going to be talking about books? I don't know. I'm so ignorant, but we'll get into that. Before all, could you just introduce yourself to the culties and share a little bit about your relationship to the Cult of BookTok personally?
Absolutely. Hi, guys. My name is Morgann Book. I'm like plugging my last name in there because no one ever believes that it's actually Book. I actually started with like cake decorating content for a couple years, and then I made the switch over to BookTok in like 2021, 2022 when BookTok itself was like coming up. And ever since then, I've just been on the app just talking about literally everything related to books.
Cake decorating. That might be the one thing that would get me on the platform.
So for folks like Amanda who choose to live their life sans TikTok entirely and who are unacquainted with BookTok, how would you describe or explain what it is as a whole?
That's like asking a reader like to name their favorite book. It's hard to explain like what BookTok is because it encompasses so much. In a one sentence thing, it's like an online community of readers. But like going beyond that, it's recommendations, it's reading vlogs, it's people sharing their love for books. And that's why I have so many books on my shelves because they just come and go so quickly.
Wait, what is a reading vlog?
A reading vlog is kind of like one of my favorite videos to watch from start to finish the creator takes their audience to the bookstore to pick up the book and then kind of vlogs the reading of the book.
Okay, so it's almost like live tweeting the cliff notes of
honestly
A Court of Thorns and Roses or whatever.
It's pretty much like that. Like you kind of just like take short clips throughout reading the book. And as some, like if I've already read the book, I love watching those videos because it's like complete spoilers and I can kind of see their reactions going through the book because I know what's coming. The audience will often know what's coming while the book talker, the creator, is kind of just like living in the moment of reading the book and we all get to experience it again.
Okay. So to summarize so far, we have the online shopping sort of consumerist aspect of BookTok. That's like someone else has XYZ book. I need to get it too to be a part of this group. I need to keep up. I need to have that perfect BookTok collection. And then you have the sort of communal aspect where through watching someone else's reading experience, you get to feel uncannily connected to them. And this also confirms something that I find to be generally culty about the internet. I mean, this is a slightly cynical way of putting it, but I find that people don't always want to learn something new. They just want to be told something they already know in like a really beautiful way.
Yeah, that's what BookTok is because we see these books all the time. We don't want to be told to read them. If we can see someone else experiencing the book, sold.
Who were you as a reader before BookTok? And then how did the cult transform you?
I asked myself the same question. It's not an addiction, but it is. I can't go to the bookstore and buy a book if I have not seen that book on social media.
Are you just not drawn to books otherwise?
I think I understand, and I think it has to do with the cult aspect. BookTok is first and foremost a community. It's not a book recommendation service, it's a book connection community. And so if you were to read a book that is outside of that community, it would give you nothing to talk to people about. It would give you no connective tissue. And that's very interesting. Everyone reads for different reasons. Some people read to learn, some people read to escape, some people read to connect. And like so far, that's what I'm understanding of BookTok.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about reading something outside of BookTok is like kind of weird, but it also goes back to being a cult. Some people will come on this app and be like, I know you've never heard of this book before, or this is not a BookTok book, or I randomly started reading this one and I know you've never seen it before, but you have to read it. That is how books will often come into BookTok. Like I remember last year, there was like a massive uptake in this book called Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. No one had ever seen this book. The dark romance genre wasn't massive on BookTok, and a couple creators talked about this book very briefly and it blew up. I feel like that happens a lot more lately. A couple people talk about them, the book blows up, and it's on like bestseller lists now.
That is one thing that I really, really value is that a book that has not been blessed by the publishing industry, that has not had a ton of resources from the marketing department or whatever poured into it, can enjoy a new life because of BookTok. That is very cool and grassrootsy in a way that a cult should be at its best.
Honestly, like I love reading books. I'm not saying I'm sick of BookTok books, but I love when an indie author's book or like a debut novel gets picked up by the BookTok algorithm and it just goes viral.
Okay, just to back up for a second, when you noted that dark romance hadn't really picked up on BookTok yet, that really contextualized for me the timeline of BookTok and how it has come into the public perception. We had never gotten any requests for this topic until a few months ago, and now it feels like literally every day someone is sliding in our Instagram DMs being like, oh my god, BookTok is such a cult. Please talk about the dark fantasy section of BookTok, all the dark romance, it's so crazy. Why do you think that is? Like, where in that timeline was the shift from casual book community to like full-blown cult?
When you guys had referenced BookTok as a cult, I was like, not a cult. And then I like sat back and thought about it and I was like, oh my god. You get a couple creators on there saying, read this one book, everyone does it. You will have some creators pull one quote, the first line in a book, and they're like, go read this book, and people will. Over the last like year or so, this new term romantasy has been coined, which I've never heard that word before a year ago, and nor had I ever used that word, but it's been around for a while. Like ACOTAR and Throne of Glass are books that have been around for 6-7 years now, and was always referred to as like a fantasy with a romance subplot. It's kind kind of a mouthful sometimes. And now whoever the heck came up with romantasy, everyone's like, love it, love it, love it, love it. And ACOTAR is not a word. It's so well known, but the series is called A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I think over the last year, this like romantasy, dark romance, fantasy has provided such a good escape from the real world. And they're just fun books. Like the one I had mentioned before, Butcher and Blackbird, is about these two serial killers who fall in love. If that isn't just like pure silly escapism, but like written very well, I don't know what is. So I think books like that just provide this massive escape from the real world and are just fun to read is what created this uptake in that genre.
Escaping from the real world? I mean, if that's not a cult motive, I don't know what is.
So I'm hearing ACOTAR, I'm hearing Throne of Glass. These are names that I heard thrown around the halls of my high school. Can you sort of give us, would you say, top 5 key texts or like beginners required reading to join BookTok?
Yes. Number 1 is A Court of Thorns and Roses. Number 2 is any Emily Henry book. My personal favorite is Funny Story, which is her most recent release. Number 3, I would say Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. That is early BookTok, popular, young adult, fantasy, found family, all of that. 4 would be the Chestnut Spring series by Elsie Silver. This is like small town romance, cowboys, bull riding, stuff like that. That blew up on BookTok also a couple years ago. And then number 5, I would say probably The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. That's like the historical fiction, fantasy, romance, tearjerker book that everyone seems to be talking about.
If you are listening to and even enjoying this episode of the podcast and want to go deeper, I have a book recommendation for you. This is your host, Amanda, by the way, and the book is called The Age of Magical Overthinking, and I wrote it. I poured my heart into this book, and I really think you might like it. It's about delusion and obsession in the information age, and how the ways in which our minds naturally work are clashing with our current culture. Every chapter explores some confounding irrationality from contemporary society, including extreme cycles of celebrity worship and dethronement, mass embrace of Instagram manifestation gurus during times of crisis, and why our bodies sometimes enter literal fight or flight in response to something as objectively non-threatening as a curt email from a coworker. The book blends social science with pop culture analysis and personal stories. And if you prefer audiobooks, I recorded mine myself, so it's kind of like an extension of the podcast. Again, the book is called The Age of Magical Overthinking, Notes on Modern Irrationality, and it's available wherever books are sold. Your local indie bookstore, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, or even that one massive online book retailer run by a cult leader. You know the one. So if you enjoy this podcast, I really hope you'll consider checking out the book. This episode of Sounds Like a Cult is brought to you by Liquid IV. Culties, if you know me, you know I'm obsessed with relaxing. I'm recording this in my pajamas, in my bed. Creating a cozy environment and showing yourself some love during times of stress is very important. Self-love looks different for everyone. But one thing that I'm pretty sure absolutely everybody on this planet can benefit from is giving yourself the everyday indulgence of extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. They come in these little travel-sized tubes. All you gotta do is tear, pour, and enjoy. Now that I'm in my flirty 30s, I'm also trying to take much better care of my body. And Liquid IV is amazing because it's powerfully hydrating. And they truly have so many flavors I really think you'll enjoy. White peach, rainbow sherbet. They're so fun and fancy. Break the mold and own your ritual. Just 1 stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Powered by LIV Hydroscience, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. Treat yourself to extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code CULT at checkout. That's 20% off your first order with code CULT at liquidiv.com. So obviously TikTok is an algorithm-based platform more than any other social media, and that can lead you to believe that your specific algorithm is the whole world. and that can kind of psychologically isolate a person a tiny bit. you know?
Extremely so.
Because I see your passion and how badly you want us to join you. And I imagine some of that must come from this experience where you're like, what do you mean you're not on BookTok? Because if you're on TikTok and that is your algorithm, then that must feel like the whole entire world. And if someone's not on it, then they don't exist. But I am interested in how this community organizes itself because it is algorithm based. It is on our phones, disembodied. Maybe there are BookTok conventions. I'm not sure. But I was wondering, could you explain, is BookTok a sort of diverse cult of many denominations? How is it organized, this cult?
Okay. First of all, we do have book conventions. I have never gone to one. We don't have many in Canada, so they're all in the US. So I haven't made the trip yet. Organization wise, I would say yes, there are different pockets of booktokkers. I would say the main hub is the fantasy, romantasy, romance genres. Like, I feel like that is what BookTok is at its core. When you go to Indigo, when you go to Barnes & Noble, you see all the romantasy. Those are what holds us together, I would say. There is little pockets of thriller booktokkers, which I'm like slowly trying to like dip my toes into them and figure out. Nothing compares to a dark thriller. They freak me out sometimes. I would say it goes by genre. And then it also somewhat goes by age. I would say like most booktokkers are in their 20s and 30s. And then anything beyond that, like my mom will show me these booktokkers that she loves. And I was like, never seen them before. So you're so right in saying that we have different algorithms for different books.
It is fascinating to me because it is just like so different from the way that I read and so passionate. I don't want to suggest that like
it's the wrong way to enjoy reading or books or share.
Exactly. Like when a community provides a sort of new fringy way of doing something old, just like this, that might be culty and it might disturb some people, sure. But I want to clarify that I don't think that necessarily makes something bad.
Ah, yes.
But I guess I do want to keep kind of prodding to understand what the cultification of BookTok says about what those who participate in it are seeking, if that makes sense. So like, has BookTok gotten cultier because people are looking for a cure for their loneliness? Is it a bid for identity? Like, what do you think, Morgann?
Yeah, I would say the uptake in BookTok comes from inputting personality into book recommendations. Like you mentioned the New York Times list. I've never looked at that list a day in my life. I'm not looking at any other books on that list because it doesn't often mean anything to me, or I don't want to speak for all readers, but I don't really know anyone who's checking out the New York Times list anymore. Their book recommendations and what we read comes directly from BookTok because you're getting people's real opinions on these books, which is why I think sometimes publishers' social medias don't do well because they're saying read all of these books, whereas booktokkers and creators will tell you which books to read and why and which ones not to read because they didn't like them. And if you can find a creator where your reading tastes directly align, you'll read every book that they put out.
Oh my God, if I could find a booktokker whose reading taste directly aligned with mine, like I would be down. I'm starting to feel like that's not a thing.
I'll find you one.
That's what I was telling Morgann when you stepped out of the room. The corner of TikTok that I was on that most resembled BookTok when I was on it was somewhat of like a lit ficky side of BookTok that I feel like it's still the same ideas of people connecting over books and like sharing these recommendations.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just there's something about the conformist hype machine surrounding something that I cherish. And let's be frank, like as an author, I'm just like afraid of it. So the fact that there is like so much energy and so many strong opinions and that a book could be uplifted or disgraced so quickly within like a 30-second video, it makes me nervous. It makes me feel nervous.
It is rough out there. For you being an author, I actually don't blame you for not being on TikTok because it's brutal. If I don't like a book, I'm not going to post about it. But some people throw these books into the mud on BookTok. I feel bad because it's not even often they're like bashing the writer's talents. It's just like they didn't like a character or they didn't like a story or something.
I read books all the time that I don't care for and I just put them to the side. I DNF them, as they say in this cult. I DNF them. That means did not finish. And I forget about them and I don't feel the need to express my opinion about them. But I guess this connects to our next question. Like, I'm a little skeptical of who the leaders of BookTok might be. Who are these people in your opinion? What are their motivations? Do they really read every book that they review?
Good question. Literally, like, if they can pack a punch with their video and with their content and what they're saying about the book, they'll probably rise to the top. Like, if they're showing a lot of emotion in what they're reading and they're diversifying their content in the sense that they're not just doing book recommendations, they're doing everything. They're reading you one quote in the middle of the book. They're doing a reading vlog. They're taking you to the bookstore. They're showing any and everything they can about a book and they're expressing true, genuine emotion. I find that on TikTok these days, it's very easy to spot an ad, which is kind of a gray area when it comes to books because you're like, are you being paid to talk about liking this book or did you actually like it? So you can fish through the hashtags. If there's like a hashtag partner, like you kind of know sometimes and you find the genuine creators who you know, if they've talked about this author before and now they're promoting a new book, you're like, okay, they actually probably liked it. But if they've never talked about this genre before, like you can kind of poke holes into what people are being genuine with or not.
Okay, we made this comparison in a recent episode about the cult of Harry Potter. But it's like, what is Christianity other than just like a really, really, really old book club? It's just like people are still talking about the Bible. Holy shit. And in that same way, BookTok feels like a religion. It's just a lot of people talking very passionately about books. But famously, a lot of followers of Christianity don't even read the Bible or scrutinize it that carefully. And maybe this is my bias, by the way. Like, as I said in the beginning, I'm telling you, like, I fear it and I honor it like the ocean. Like, I don't want to go near it, but I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, you can admire it from the distance. That's totally fine.
I do. But then at the same time, I'm a little like, oh, I don't know. Do you think that there are ever people who just want to be famous BookTokers for reasons other than the love of books?
Maybe, but that takes a lot of effort to like know what these books are about and talk about them. I feel like you have to read them.
Reese, what do you think? You've treaded up close to this, but what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people find engaging with the book in a communal sense more attractive than engaging with the literature, which is kind of what you were saying earlier. And to that end, I think, sure, I could totally see someone liking a book for like, how well can I cosplay its characters? What TikTok sounds align with what tropes go on in these books? I think the tropification of literature is also a huge contributor to what makes BookTok feel inauthentic at times to me, because it turns into people reading books in order to categorize them and kind of manually sort them into an algorithm, as opposed to really get anything from the book itself. So I wouldn't say that I don't think people are reading them. I think people are looking at the words and taking them in, but I don't know if people are reading them.
Okay, that's helpful. And Morgan, feel free to disagree. The whole point of this podcast is to like over dramatize things. Like, we're half kidding. Truly, my most genuine thought is just, I love that people are reading. People have been warning me that the publishing industry and books are like on death's door. And if this exists and this is keeping books alive, huge slay, love. But it is a sign of the times that BookTok is kind of just like another one of these modern day cults that is at times perhaps less about the thing itself and more about what the symbol of that thing says about you and how it can make you feel less alone in the world. And that doesn't necessarily have to be bad. It's just not the reason why I engage with books.
I see both sides. And as you guys were talking about reading just to be famous, it's more what I see that ruffles BookTok's feathers is already famous people picking up a book. It's a very polarizing topic in the sense that half the comments are like, welcome to BookTok, read this and read this and read this. And the other people, not necessarily commenting, but like stitching. And they're like, this person is trying to be a book talker. This person is like not a reader. They're just picking up So ACOTAR, also very polarizing. Some people loved it. Some people hated it.
She's a whole cult leader in her own right, so I've heard.
You guys aren't going to read these books. Can I spoil a little something?
Yeah.
Okay. So she's got ACOTAR, she's got Throne of Glass, and she's got Crescent City.
The author, Sarah J. Maas, that is.
Yes. I think with the rise of the popularity of ACOTAR, she was like, okay, how can I do something else with this? So she created a multiverse in Crescent City, which is her newest series, to allow ACOTAR characters characters to come into that one. Because the people who have just read ACOTAR will go pick up Crescent City just because they know they can have their favorite characters again in that series. Because we haven't gotten a new book.
This woman could start Scientology 2.0 easily.
And I don't know how I dodged so many spoilers, but I knew something was coming at the end of book 2 in the Crescent City series. And I got to the end and I was like, yes, I'm shocked, but I'm also like, what a brilliant marketing move to do that so then people can go read these other books.
What are some rituals that booktokkers engage in that someone who reads and loves books but is not involved with BookTok would never even know about? Like, are there things that booktokkers say or do as a result of the actual features of the app that may like affect your reading experience or stuff like that?
Okay, really good question. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is some creators will go live just to read. Not a single word is said on the live, but they prop up their phone and they read, and it kind of creates this like virtual book club of like some people reading the same book and other people reading different books. I've never done it myself, but I have joined other people's just to like check it out and see what they're doing. Things like that are directly caused because of the app though. I would say little things. Like when I first joined BookTok, I was dog-earing the pages. And apparently that's a big no-no on BookTok.
Okay, why?
Oh, because it ruins the book apparently. So have I dog-eared a page since? No.
But they're your books.
This is why it's a cult, guys.
This is why it's a cult. Don't let the internet tell you what to do with your books.
No.
I'm sad.
It's so bad. Like sometimes I do it just to like mess with them a little bit, just to rebel. Also because like I know people will comment about it. People comment about something they hate, brings up the engagement, obviously.
Here we go.
Dissenting for engagement. That's culty.
People just like things a certain way. You're not allowed to hold a book like this. You're not allowed to break the spine. You can't dog ear pages. This is like not actual rules, but these are things that I've seen on BookTok where people are like, no, not allowed.
Well, that's what a rule is in a cult. It's an unspoken.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And I wonder about your opinion on this, Morgann. Like,
Yeah.
I love books so much, but when I read a book and I love it, that feels like a very precious private thing. And when another person loves that thing, it's cool at first. And then I almost feel like protective of it because I don't even want to know what they think about the book because I don't want it to interfere with my experience, right? And I wonder if what you were talking about before, like sort of doing these like edgelordy things on BookTok for engagement purposes, do you think that the very nature of trying to capture people's attention with these various tactics on BookTok has made people more fanatical and culty and like opinionated and ritualistic, etc., about their reading habits in general? People who use BookTok, that is.
I would say so, yes. I would say when it comes to like comments and opinions, though, people are still way meaner on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is just like more hatred towards like even authors and stuff. Like I've talked to so many authors where they're like, I can't even look at my comments, can't look at my DMs, like nothing. So I would say in like more of the BookTok sense, I think people are a little bit nicer when it comes to their thoughts and opinions. But I think it ultimately depends on like what book they're talking about.
Morgann, thank you so much for giving us the lowdown about BookTok. Now that our American listeners can once again find you on TikTok, at what handle can they do so? And where else can they find you?
My handle is at Morgann Book everywhere. It's Morgann with 2 N's on everything.
Incredible. This episode of Sounds Like a Cult is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Calling my wayfaring culties, my culties who have travel coming up in their future. If you're looking for a hotel or vacation rental, I'm telling you, Booking.com has exactly what you're looking for. I'm actually planning a little trip to New York. There's an off-Broadway show I want to see. And I gotta tell you, when I'm in New York, hotels are the way to go, if you're catching my drift. But it's tough, because some New York City hotels are not up to snuff. But Booking.com truly offers everything. If I'm looking for something bougie or something thrifty or something right there in Midtown near all the theaters, Booking.com makes it super easy to narrow down my search. And you can get super specific with it, like if you want to stay at a hotel that has a sauna or a pool. No matter who you are, Booking.com has the stay that is ridiculously right for you. It's perfect for finding vacation stays and hotels throughout the United States. So what are you waiting for? Find exactly what you're booking for on Booking.com. Booking.yeah.
So, we have already gotten some baseline info about the Cult of BookTok more generally, but to get more tea, we would love to introduce Ayman of Ayman's Books. Welcome, Ayman.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Could you introduce yourself and share the story of how you became entangled in the Cult of BookTok in the first place?
Oh my gosh, there's like so much to unpack here, but I'll keep it brief. Obviously, I do like book content. I like joined when everybody started doing content creation, you know, quarantine 2020, boredom at home, all the time on my hands. And then I just like fell back into reading because I found this community. And back then, what that community looked like on TikTok versus what it is now is totally different. People didn't even know what to call the book community. BookTok came like later in the year, but I was there since it was just like a couple girlies here and there just talking about books. And then I think later in like August of 2020, I started like making content to entertain myself. Then, you know, the quote unquote one viral video later and got a platform. The rest is history. And we're here today.
Can you just tell the culties what that one viral video was?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I forgot the creator who I duetted, but he had said something along the lines of like, oh my god, reading is weird or it's not cool, like something along the lines of that. And then I like duetted it. I was like, oh my god, reading is like a movie in your effing head, and like slapping a book on the camera of my phone. It's the most cringiest thing ever, but it got over like 1 million views. Looking back at it now, it's like, why was I even yelling at this guy? Like, but I mean, it worked out. The first video, I hardly think about it because I look back at it and I'm like, okay, yeah, it got me like out there, but I can't even look at it. It's a bit too much.
No one relates more than me. There are some videos of me on the internet. Oh, I want to die. But you are very funny, Ayman. I have come across your videos on Instagram, forgive me, but there's this one video you have where you're like, my pretentious ass reading alone at a bar or whatever.
Oh my god,
like,
yeah.
I've shared that with so many people, so you're really representing the girlies.
I love that. That is me to a T. Like, I am that type of person that is bringing a book with me literally everywhere I go. It's quite annoying.
Oh, Reese and I were joking about it. I was like, my favorite emotion is smug. Like,
Yeah.
anything that helps me along this journey. Reading lit fic alone at a bar.
I like that.
I could be doing coke.
Exactly. Like, this is my drug of choice.
Yes, exactly. So getting into some of the more culty aspects of BookTok, could you recall a specific instance from your personal experience of this cult as being culty in a good way? Some moment where either you or someone else really transcended in some capacity, thanks to BookTok.
Okay, this is the first thing that comes to mind. So yesterday, Onyx Storm released and from Rebecca Yarros, which is like the #1 book of this year. Everybody's been anticipating it. And so Target did an exclusive edition only available on that day. It was kind of like the Taylor Swift book moment, but for obviously the book community. So the lines were wrapping around the Targets. They, I think, had 14 of them on release day, which is crazy because there's like 100 plus people in line. The Target that I went to is in the middle of nowhere. Why are people there? Target opens at 8. I was there like 7:45. There was like 40 people in line for this book. It's a special edition, so it's exclusive. There's limited quality, but I think it goes to show how culty, I guess, BookTok is, because we come together for things like this, like special books on the release day. Can't be pre-ordered. It's literally like the Hunger Games, but for like all these book people. So like in a way, I mean, I guess it's good for like the publishing industry, the author, you know, making some good money. Love that for her. But at what cost? You know?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, people lining up early in the morning like this, I'm obviously familiar with that behavior in the context of like Harry Potter, but the book that you just named, I've never heard of it.
I saw Morgan's story about it yesterday, actually.
I love Morgann book. Oh my gosh, what a queen. But they did like a midnight release for it, like they did with like Harry Potter back in the day. And apparently that hasn't been a thing since Harry Potter. They do it for like the biggest authors that are coming out with their latest release. You know, for example, yesterday was for Rebecca Yarros, who wrote Fourth Wing, which is like this romantic fantasy series that has like blown up. The Onyx Storm is the third one, and people are reselling them for crazy prices as well. So this is like a moment where BookTok has like come together, and we've just gone crazy for this one book. And it's not that different from the original one. Maybe the design on one side is a little different, like the spine, and there's like a sprayed edge, and like I think there's also art within the book. To an outsider looking in, everyone's like, okay, well, what's the reason to line up hours before the store opened, whatever. But to the people that get it, they know this is like once in a lifetime, limited opportunity. I gotta get it before somebody else. So like I applaud the book community for sticking to our love for books when it comes to things like this.
Okay, this is all very Swiftie coded.
No, it really is though. I compare a lot of books to like Taylor Swift lyrics, and I am a personal like Swiftie myself, you know. I was there Chicago Night 3. I also write in my books. Some people think that's illegal, but whatever. And I usually write song lyrics, and they're 9 times out of 10 Taylor Swift lyrics or Gracie Abrams lyrics or something like that. Anything that I can associate with Taylor Swift, because I think she's written basically about me in all her lyrics. I relate to everything that she says.
You've stood in the kitchen in refrigerator light?
Yeah, I did, with my book in hand.
Wait, sorry, I have to ask. And there are BookTok books that are based on the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce love story now, are there not? So a whole culty crossover happening.
That's why I'm saying it's like a direct pipeline, because I did see something along the lines of like authors coming out with pop star and football romance, you know?
It's just fan fiction.
It's literally fan fiction. That's what it is. And what's impressive about it is like they come out with it like instantly. Like, we're done. Book's out. You can read it.
Everything that you're describing, it's Taylor coded and it's Ray Dunn coded, because it's like girlies with a lot of feelings and a lot of passions who are just exercising that in an ever lonely era through a community that they discovered online. This line for Rebecca Yarros' book is the Eras tour for BookTok, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. We're like a force to be reckoned with, you know what I'm saying? Like, my good time is literally just sitting in that bed reading a book. You wouldn't expect us to have this much energy and be dedicated to the things that we love, but like,
yeah,
you know, we have so much power.
You could turn it out.
Yes. But then it's like, you said the phrase earlier, at what cost? So have you ever noticed BookTok take a turn for the culty in like a negative way?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I've been in this community since like the very beginning, so I feel like I've seen everything, and anything new that happens, I'm like, okay, I'm not that surprised by it, because I'm like desensitized. You wouldn't think that this community can be aggressive or problematic in some ways or this or that. Overall, I think it's a great community. We're mostly a group of like women celebrating our love for reading and everything like that, but we do have our moments where some people in our community cross the line and can't differentiate reality versus fiction. And the prime example that I see through that is when, for example, there's a popular book and people start to fan cast real people, like either models or actors or literally TikTok influencers, and that line is crossed from their boundaries versus like reality versus fiction. They are not that character. You might have fan casted them as so-and-so character in whatever book, but at the end of the day, you shouldn't be in their comment section harassing them, you know, asking them for making provocative videos, stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, we're reading about fictional characters in a fictional world, in a fictional sense, and that's a real person. So I've seen that boundary, that line crossed multiple times. And I'm not just saying it's the reader's problem. Sometimes it's even the person that's been fan casted not respecting the reader's space or something like that. Because honestly, the space is mostly women. And a lot of times the people that are fan casted for these characters are guys, like hot people on the internet, if I'm going to be honest. And sometimes, like, okay, if you're getting all this attention from women, be respectful. Obviously, like, if anybody's not respecting you, draw your boundaries, you know, make it clear and everything like that. But like, even as of recently, I've seen some people that have been fan casted for X, Y, and Z characters just like hate on this community, but also they benefit from it too. Like, they only like it when it's good for them and then hate it when they want to make fun of it. So it's like, do you even take this space seriously? We have transformed the book publishing industry, authors' lives and stuff like that. And I feel like men, at the most part, but like everyone all together, obviously need to fully understand that.
Yeah, for sure. And just to clarify for the less chronically online, to be fan cast is quite a big deal. It is essentially when the fans of a certain piece of written media designate you as what some would call a face claim or the physical representation of said character. Ayman, could you give an example?
Okay, I don't know their names, but I can recognize their faces when I see them, like, on my For You page. For example, there's this book series. It's called The Devil's Night series by Penelope Douglas, and it's like this dark romance series. It follows these 4 group of guys, and the quote-unquote official fan cast for them are, like, just these TikTokers. I think they're models as well. So, like, literally their face is, like, everywhere, right? Like,
the cult has decided that these boys are these characters.
Yeah. And recently I saw them kind of dogging on the community and said, we hate BookTok, this and that, blah, 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 on a live stream that they were on. But then they'll hold the actual book up in their videos and make thirst traps about it. So it's like, okay, you hate us just to hate us, but you still use us for views. So that's where I'm like, this is not cute anymore. We're gonna have to switch over the fan cast to get somebody new.
Okay, I have a question. Obviously, most of this hype and fanaticism is surrounding genre books, this dark fantasy genre, characters and worlds that are not of reality. And some of these behaviors also seem not of reality. It's hard for me to imagine lovers of, like, I don't know, history books engaging in this type of behavior. And I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between the genre itself and like the content of the literature itself and some of this kayfabe.
Oh my gosh. No, yeah, that's like a lot to unpack as well. But obviously at the forefront of book talk, it is mostly romance. But that doesn't just go to show that that's the only genre and community that can exist on book talk. Like, I personally really love fantasy and thrillers and even the occasional memoir, non-fictional books, this and that, blah, blah, blah. I like to keep my palette pretty diverse, even though I mostly read romance. From an outsider looking in, obviously this community just looks very romance-oriented, but just when you really get into it, and if you've been in it as long as I have, you see that there's a little bit of everything. Every genre has people that create content for it, if that makes sense. A lot of people think, okay, if you read romance, like, you're considered dumb or blah, 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 but that's obviously not true. It's the highest read genre, most successful genre of all time, so it's like a place to be taken seriously, right? So this, like, argument, I guess, has created the argument of like anti-intellectualism within book talk, or kind of like the opposite of that, like pro-intellectualism. I'm kind of in between because I do love books that make me think beyond myself, make me think about life and everything like that. And that could be in any genre. Like, I feel like even romance in itself can create a lot of great conversations. And it just goes to show that every genre needs to be appreciated. There is room for everyone in this community, and just respect everything and everyone.
Oh, fully.
Yeah.
I want to clarify one thing when I make this comment that, like, I wonder if the genre of fantasy or romance or whatever gives way to more culty behavior on book talk. I don't mean that as a negative judgment about like the minds of people who read fantasy. I'm almost saying it from like a perspective of fantasy inherently and romance inherently, because they are fictional genres, give you so much more to play with. So I'm writing fiction now, and I've only ever written nonfiction in the past. And it has already made me lean into my like Delulu girly alter ego where like I think my characters are real. I'm fan casting them in my head. I'm like living in this fantasy world that is frankly so much more fun.
It truly is. At the end of the day, like, fiction till I ride or die, like, it's always going to be my top for me. Fictional settings, fantasy, romance, whatever. Creating this whole world in your head, and it's like quite endless too. It's not just like these defined corners and these blank characters. They're characters with layers and feelings. It's so fun creating literally these movies in your head.
I think where it gets culty is not the book or the genre side of it, it's the talk.
Yeah.
It's the sort of like when you fan cast someone and it goes from your head to a comment section, and now the parasociality of it, we've really crossed into the event horizon.
Some people think that they know these people, and then some of those fan casted people think that they know us. But you're so right. It's literally the talk. Obviously, we're reading fiction books. We're escaping from reality. We're in our head. But then we get on the internet. We talk about those books and make videos out of them. And that's where it becomes reality. That's where it becomes talk. And that's where like our problems arise.
Exactly. And I actually have a little counterpoint that can show that sometimes a nonfiction text on Book Talk can be even cultier than a fiction text. So we hinted at this earlier. I would love to talk about examples of Book Talk disrupting the publishing industry by transforming self-published authors into bestsellers. Now, one example that we found was the case of The Shadow Work Journal by Keela Shaheen. Have you heard of this book?
Tell me more about it, because it sounds familiar.
So basically, the book publicist Scott Lorenz wrote this blog post about how BookToker Conglay gushed about this book once on Book Talk, basically saying that it was this like spiritually healing work of genius. That's how they found the book. And as a result of this endorsement, the author sold almost 700,000 copies directly through TikTok Shop. That's according to the New York Times.
Wow.
That's
Impressive.
like so beyond.
This is kind of sounding familiar.
Apparently, it was quite the hullabaloo. So commenting on what BookTokers really are attracted to on this platform, Scott Lawrence said that users really want to see like genuine book endorsements that are extremely short and to the point, which makes sense. That's the platform. But in this context, it got a little sketchy. That's exactly what this endorsement by Conglay was. And on one hand, like, of course, it's amazing how Book Talk overcomes some of the awful elitist gatekeeping that exists in the publishing industry that I fucking resent so much. And that, frankly, is the whole entire reason why I podcast because I'm an author and like I want to reach more people, right?
So hard.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, like I absolutely love and I'm like, fuck yeah, stick it to the man that BookTok can overcome this elitism. But on the other hand, we wonder if there aren't downsides to that disruption because for Business Insider, reporter Julia Pugachevsky penned a piece titled, "I tried the viral shadow work journal touted as a substitute for therapy. It was so bad that I couldn't finish." And she commented on how the author is not a licensed therapist. She made some other critiques, but because of the like, oh my God, bestie, you have to buy this book, it changed my life vibe on BookTok in these short format videos, many of the shadow work journal's readers trusted it as a legitimate mental health resource. So my question for you is like, do you think that this sort of hype machine nature of BookTok is negatively affecting people's ability to engage with literature critically sometimes?
Yeah, that even reminds me of like other examples that I've seen throughout BookTok as a whole of it's kind of like wrongly shelving a book in a genre that it's not supposed to be in. You know what I'm saying? Like I've seen that happen within some fictional books as well. Like for example, it's like a fantasy book and it's purely fantasy. There might be like a sliver of romance. I don't want to mean a sliver. I mean like they probably glance at each other. And then people hyperfixate on that and just forget the whole fantasy world and like everything that happens in there when really it's like, yo, this is a fantasy book. Let's talk about the actual main plot points of it and the world building, maybe the battle and the wars and whatever the heck happens in that book. Let's actually talk about that versus this little small detail because then it just takes away from the author's hard work as well, creating this world. And I see that with the example you just mentioned about the shadow journal. I see it happen with so many different genres, so many different kinds of books, so many books that are like, okay, you can tell this book is written for a certain community, like a marginalized community, and then people outside of that marginalized community don't respect it in the way that they talk about it within their videos and just take away from that essence that it's trying to portray. And I hate that, honestly. I hate when we like miss genre things. I'm like, damn, you're making this look bad. Like, don't do this. Did you read the book?
Yeah, I think TikTok both creates more distance and shrinks the distance between the reader and the author in this really interesting way that can like muddy up the conversation in ways that I feel like might implore people to just discuss books in ways that are less accurate than we might like, but better for content creation. The tropification of books is something I see on TikTok a lot, or like the overemphasis of specific tropes on specific books, I think contributes to this. And it leaves a lot more of fantasy getting pushed into the romance genre because, you know, there's a romantic plotline that's present and we can cling to that and spread it around circles where the book maybe doesn't belong. And I think along that same vein, TikTok has this huge obsession with glow up and self-improvement culture. And I think when you combine that with the cult of BookTok, that distance works in a way that's beneficial to authors that might not be qualified in the realms that they're selling books in, you know? Like it works the other way too.
Listening to you speak about that made me think like maybe that connects to this like super tight turnaround time that we were talking about where authors are churning out books in a matter of weeks, months. I'm like, if half the point of BookTok is to make videos and to make book content, then I can see how sometimes the polish of a book might get deprioritized.
Dimmed, yeah, it's like it's not as valuable anymore.
BookTok is like almost its own world.
It truly is.
So we have been talking about the ways in which people discuss these books and how that can contribute to us interpreting them in ways that might not necessarily be a net good for people's engagement with literature as a whole. Do you think this applies to any kind of groupthink concerning opinions about books? Like, how is dissent received on BookTok when someone has maybe an unpopular opinion? And do you think that the BookTok platform might, like, deter people from developing those opinions about books that might be different from what the congregation is saying?
Right. I've seen people make compilation videos of their unpopular opinions when it comes to the entirety of BookTok, and sometimes they're railed in those comments, or sometimes people are like, okay, wait, you actually made a fair point. And I'm like, okay, I like that part of BookTok where we respect each other's opinions and stuff like that, because that's like another issue within this community where we don't respect each other's opinions, whether it be like our taste in books, what we like in certain books, and how we perceive the book after reading it. Because at the end of the day, not every reader is the same. We're all unique in our own different ways. So the way I read the same exact book you have, and the way I take it in versus the way you do could be entirely different or totally the same. Who knows? But that's like another way that people need to understand to respect those spaces and stuff. Because like I do have definitely some unpopular opinions when it comes to the whole book world and everything like that. And I'm like, wait, should I bite my tongue? Should I make a video about this? Do I want to cause turmoil on my page? I'm pretty peaceful for the most part. But like I'll talk about it with my friends on FaceTime or something like that. And maybe some opinions need to be voiced and maybe some don't. Obviously, you don't want to voice any harmful opinions that actively harms anyone, any group of people or anything like that. And there have been instances on BookTok where people will say something and then get that backlash to be like, hey, like, you don't want to say that, it sounds like this.
Yeah, and I think BookTok has the potential to do so much good in that capacity because, like, obviously reading teaches you new things, and if we're all learning new things and sharing these new things with each other, that's great. But I am interested in learning through more of a cult-like lens how these topics are kind of chosen to circulate and what ideologies are circulating with them. So we wanted to ask you a little bit more about your perspective on the diversity of books that are chosen by BookTok and whether that's an issue that you see arise in the community and how that's being addressed if it is.
Yeah, as a person that's been in this community for so long, I've seen how this community has like transformed the book publishing industry, but also the way that readers read and the books that we choose to engage with and talk about and make content about. Like for me, prior to BookTok, I was literally only reading the popular books, and 9 times out of 10 those were like, you know, white, cishet, straight books that were just popular. Maybe their movies were coming out, this and that. And then when I got to BookTok, it was really when I diversified my reading and I read outside of the 2 genres that I really read and found books that like represented myself as like a hijabi woman or other communities. Because I think like fiction is so powerful in the sense of like, yes, this is fiction, it's the fictional world, but we can have such deep conversations in these books that pertain to real life. One of my favorite books of all time is the Legendborn series, and it follows this young black woman that's basically, she finds out she has this magic, and it's kind of like a King Arthur retelling, so she is like Arthur, and she's surrounded by people not believing her, and that kind of turns into like, okay, this is giving like racist, and like this can reflect in real life situations, even though this is like a fantasy book about a girl with powers. But anyways, the overall point I'm trying to make is like BookTok has transformed the publishing industry in the sense of making it more inclusive and diverse and stuff. Like before, I didn't even know books with the main character being a hijabi Muslim woman existed. Like I didn't know any of that until I found creators, whether they must be Muslim or not, creating videos talking about these books that actually exist by these Muslim authors. Like, damn, I didn't know what I was missing out on, because you can't really necessarily miss something that you didn't have in your life before, but that's what it kind of felt like reading those books for the first time. And I do appreciate the book community overall doing that. I feel like there's still a lot of work to be done. Still at the forefront of the book community, it is white, cis books, this and that, and those books are great too, don't get me wrong, but there should be more room for every kind of book with every kind of representation and inclusiveness and diverseness as a whole, so we all feel represented. I guess it falls down to the reader to actually having that self kind of conversation with them. I'm like, okay, let me diversify my reading like palette, the books that I buy, engage with, talk about, whatever it is, because it honestly changes you as a person. Like you become more eye-opened, and it teaches you a lot of things without you even realizing it, because you're reading for the story, but you get a lot more than just the fictional story. You get literally everything out of it.
Based on your wonderful answer to that question, I just wanted to ask one more thing, which is I'm hearing that at the same time that there are like maybe cons to BookTok, like the shadow work journal making some people think that they don't need therapy, there are major pros because it is book recommendations by the people, not by the elitist publishing industry. And it's obvious that there are pros and cons to both those things. Do you have any advice for how people can engage with the cult of BookTok in the best way and like the ritualistic, hypey way, but not in the toxic, ignorant, discouraging, culty way?
Absolutely. Honestly, my number one advice is just to follow a diverse range of creators, engage with their content, because, you know, your 40 page is curated to you. If you are here complaining about, okay, well, I don't necessarily get a diverse range of book recommendations from BookTok, that kind of is very telling on yourself. Like, okay, maybe you don't necessarily engage with creators from all different kinds of genres. Like, if you want book recommendations with either certain tropes or representation or whatever that, you can literally search and you will find it. It will be at the very top of the page, and then like it, engage with it, save it, whatever, and there you go. Your 40 page is already diversified. I just follow people that I really liked from all different types of genres, not just romance, which is my favorite genre, but like literally niche specific parts of the BookTok internet. You wouldn't even think there were content creators within that niche specific part of BookTok, but there are. It's such a big community from an insider. So that's my number one advice. You have have to put in a little bit of the work yourself.
Make Father Algorithm work for you.
Exactly.
Now that we have made you talk about how culty BookTok is, now you get to play a fun little game. This is a brand new game to Sounds Like a Cult. We are going to give you a cult we have covered on this show, and you are going to recommend them a book, preferably a BookTok book.
Okay.
Our first cult, Astrology Lovers.
I'm gonna recommend the Zodiac Academy. It's like a 12-book series, and it's not about zodiacs particularly. It's like fantasy, it's romance, it's kind of dark, but honestly, you said astrology, I'm like, oh yeah, Zodiac Academy. I think you'll find that interesting.
Dude, I have so much respect. Every time I talk to a book talker, they're like, oh yeah, no, like there are 50 books in the series, but I flew through them. I'm like, I am such a wimp.
I get you, because those books are thick, and people will read them in one day.
I have so much respect for that. Okay, the next cult for you to choose a BookTok book for is the Cult of Gilmore Girls fans.
Oh my gosh, okay, this is so sweet. I would say like anything by Tessa Bailey. She particularly only writes rom-coms, and it's comedic but also romantic, but also like there's that book, The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. The author's name is something Gilmore, I forgot her name, but that is literally Gilmore Girls. Like you will get that vibe, that essence, that energy with books by that author.
Beautiful. Okay, Catholic school alumni, what are they reading?
Oh, I'm kind of scared. Okay, this is kind of a problematic first recommendation that came to my head, but Priest by Sierra Simone, even though that is like the opposite of what you have been learning in school, it is a romance book about a priest and a nun. Please, no one come at me. It is very hot. That is the first thing that came to mind. I can't help myself.
I am so shook at how good you are at this game. I would have no idea, dude. Like,
I can't believe they're coming to my head that quick. I should reevaluate myself.
There really is a BookTok book for everyone.
Okay, the next cult is K-pop stans.
Ooh, there's this book. It's called XOX by Axio, and it's literally about a girl that goes to Korea and she attends her favorite K-pop band concert, and I think she falls in love with the K-pop band member, like the main guy, and it goes exactly with the K-pop stand, so there you go.
Okay, last one, Sephora shoppers.
Ooh, Sephora shoppers. Okay, I'm gonna recommend the Twisted series by Anna Huang because it follows a group of 4 girls and they're very girly and this and that. But the last book in that series, called Twisted Lies, follows like a content creator. And she does fall into like fashion and stuff like that. And I know that's not makeup, but I feel like people that enjoy makeup will love that series. It's very girly, it's very cute, it's very sexy. So I'm gonna recommend the Twisted series.
Amazing. You won that fucking game.
Oh my god. I'm so impressed. Wow, I'm gonna put that on my resume. Like I can just give you book recommendations like instantly.
Seriously, you're like a magic 8-ball.
Oh my god, thank you. I'll try my hardest.
You're so welcome. Ayman, you're such a delight to speak to. As delightful, if not more, than you are in your BookTok videos.
Oh my god, stop.
If people want to keep up with you and your delightfulness, where can they do that?
They can do that on literally any social media platform. I'm Ayman's Books across the board.
Simple, easy, we love it.
All right. It is now time for our culty verdict. Reese, out of our 3 cult categories, live your life, watch your back, and get the fuck out. Which one do you think the cult of BookTok falls into?
I think it's a live your life. That's it.
Reese and I were texting about this earlier. I agree. It's a live your life. One huge green flag for BookTok is that there's no truly evil, charismatic leader presiding over the rights and liberties of everyone who engages with this.
Exactly.
Like, it's a grassroots cult, really powered by women that also benefits women. Green flag, in my opinion. And there don't seem to really be exit costs. Suddenly, you'll have to find your book recommendations elsewhere.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, hopefully you exit into like better literature, I suppose. It's more transcendence than it is an exit.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you. Also, I don't want anyone listening to this who engages with the cult of BookTok to feel judged. Like, at all. Like, truly, like, live your fucking life, man. Genuinely, like, pop off, arc those ACOTARs and DNF that NFTs or whatever the fuck. I just won't be there.
Yeah, no, hashtag it, vlog it, set up your little tripod to record a 4-second snippet of you reading. Live your life. I love it for you.
Yeah, read a book and try maybe like not even telling anyone about it.
We should each leave them with a recommendation.
That's really constructive. I love that. What do you have for the culties? What are you reading?
I am about to start reading Sherry Frankie's book that just came out about her life as the oldest 8 passengers' daughter. So I guess that's my preemptive recommendation because I haven't read it yet, but I plan to.
Very sounds like a cult reading list. Goodness. One of my favorite reads of 2024 was The Ministry of Time, which is also kind of genre bending, a little bit speculative. And that is our show.
Thank you so much for listening.
Stick around for a new cult next week. But in the meantime, stay culty. But not too culty. Sounds Like a Cult was created by Amanda Montell and edited by Jordan Moore of The Pod Cabin. This episode was hosted by Amanda Montell and Reese Oliver. This episode was produced by Reese Oliver. Our managing producer is Katie Epperson. Our theme music is by Casey Cole. If you enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave it 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show a lot. And if you like this podcast, feel free to check out my book, Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism, which inspired the show. You might also enjoy my other books, The Age of Magical Overthinking, Notes on Modern Irrationality, and Word Slut, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language. Thanks as well to our network Studio 71. And be sure to follow the Sounds Like a Cult cult on Instagram for all the discourse at Sounds Like a Cult Pod, or support us on Patreon to listen to the show ad-free at patreon.com/soundslikeacult.